Welcome today. Thank you for joining us today for the third Sunday forum. My name is Carrie Oxby, and we this third Sunday will be doing UMC Storytellers and Writers. And I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have Sam Evans, Amanda Larson, Ken Bowman, and John Stafford. We are also on Zoom, so welcome to people at home. We do not have a microphone set up. It's within the Zoom, that little owl thing you see. So we're going to try and project our voices. If you can't hear something, please let us know, or I welcome you to move up closer to the panelists. We're going to start with kind of have each panelist do an introduction and talk about their writing focus. I'll start with Sam.
My name is Sam Evans. I became an author by accident, sort of. And I would love to write Christian fiction that I am not embarrassed for my children to read. But God, I feel like my call right now is to be in the midst of grief with people. I've written a book about miscarriage, and now I'm working on another one for people who have experienced the loss of a loved one. So I get to do these not fun topics first, and then hopefully I'll get to do my fun fiction avenue as well.
My name is Amanda Larson. I'm on staff here with our children and youth, and our focus for Club 6-7, which works with our 6th and 7th grade youth this year, is storytelling. And when I told them that last week, they just got really excited, really excited. So I love that what I do professionally gets to connect with who I am as a writer. I've written 5 novels. I've published none of them. I work with a thing called National Novel Writing Month, which I started when I was working here the first time about 15 years ago. I wrote 1 novel in a month. And since then, I've completed 4 additional ones.
Good morning, I'm Ken Bowman, and I am new author. Not completely, because I don't have my book to hold in my hand yet. It's on the way. It should be published in about 4 weeks, I think. We're working on the cover right now. But this is my first venture, and I found it was very interesting because it was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. I'd pretty much written everything. I had poetry and spiritual writings that I was, oh, just put those in a book. Well, it doesn't work quite like that. So, a year ago, I signed a contract with a publisher, and so we'll see what happens. I'll tell you later about the title because it's a little bit unusual. This is my book right now, so this is what I have, and the book's title is Drowning in God's Love. I'll explain that a little bit later. So glad to be here. Thank you for asking.
Good morning, I'm John Stafford. I've been writing ever since I was a teenager, I guess, one thing or another. I've written poetry, reviews, short stories. I've had some limited publishing in those days. About 10 to 15 years ago, I decided to try writing a novel. Since then, I've written 3. And I'm very impressed with what Amanda said with her 5 novels. I want to catch up. So that's been my exclusive focus the last few years, novels. And again, thank you for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Thank you everyone for coming. So I'll go backwards. I'll start with you, John. What inspired you to begin writing?
I had a love of reading early on that was encouraged by my parents, and I appreciate that a lot. So if you're going to be a writer, you have to read. You have to read a lot. So that's always been an interest and a focus for me. That played a part. I had some encouragement by teachers when I was young. Here's another thing, and this is a little controversial, perhaps. I'll introduce it. I heard someone say once that the thing that particularly fiction writers have in common, but maybe all writers, that they have in common is they had difficult childhoods. Sometimes traumatic. My own childhood was difficult. So I can relate to that to some extent. It makes you want to express yourself. So that was an inspiration, not one that I asked for. But my childhood was also alternately wonderful. So I think that's even a better recipe if you have those two extremes in your life. So that was encouraging. So those were the main things I would point to.
As I point out in my book, my main inspiration has been my travel with God. And it sounds a little strange, I know, but it's my journey with God, my companion and my leader as well, whatever. And that's how it began back in the year 2000, on our anniversary date. I had a transforming experience on a trip. And since then, that started my poetry writing. And poetry writing for me is very, very interesting because I'll hear a word and they'll start me off. And with poetry or any kind of writing, you have to put it down right away. I was washing dishes one day at our other house, and I remember a time that the poem started forming in my head with my wet hand. I ran, I got a piece of paper and started writing it down because it goes so fast. It's just weird. But that's what inspired me. And then our other Elizabeth at Christ Church, Elizabeth Lopez, pastor, got me writing short spiritual reflections for our spirit at that point. So I wrote those for many, many years. And I thought, oh, I'll just put all that together. That won't be hard, and I'll have a book. Well, it didn't work quite that way. I signed a contract a year ago, and I'm still waiting for the book. And this is what I have right now. This is the book, but it's not in the published form. So that's been my inspiration, I think. And a lot of that came from Christ Church. Different things here.
I have been told since I was 5 that I was going to be a writer. And my mom still has my first poem framed on her wall. So I don't know that I had a choice. But what inspired me to do the novels was after having been through high school and college and graduate school, I no longer had writing to do that had deadlines, with the exception of sermons, but that's kind of an ongoing situation. So when I heard about National Novel Writing Month, where you write 1,667 words a day, and you end up with a 50,000 word novel, I thought, now that sounds like something I could do.
Like fun, right?
Yeah.
Fun.
And like John said, I read everything.
I kind of similar to Amanda, I just grew up writing, doing something that I loved. It was kind of an escape for me. John's formula about a rough childhood and good upbringing holds true for me as well. And I think it lends to an interesting perspective on life and the way things happen. Like I went through the bank teller, I tweeted about this because I went through the bank teller to make a deposit and asked for my ID. And said, if anyone comes through this bank line and wants to put money in my account, they don't need an ID. And so that's just an interesting perspective that I think some writers think of things a little more ironically, or I don't even know what that word is, but just interestingly, I guess. And then there's a saying at writers' conferences that I've heard more than once, that your first novel is an autobiography in disguise. And I've written a few novels that are unpublished. And my first one I wrote when my husband and I were going through a rough time. And I felt like like I was in this forest, kind of trying to navigate and find my way through this journey. And so the novel is definitely a reflection of what I was going through at that time. And then I finished the novel and I said, oh, I just wrote a book. And I mean, I was just writing for escape and for fun, and it just happened.
I'll start with you, Amanda, then we'll go Sam and across. Does writing energize you? Is it a spiritual experience?
At different points in my life, writing has energized me and been a spiritual experience. Maybe more the sermon writing and reflective writing, like journaling, than writing novels. But the novels also do have a spiritual aspect in them. And I must confess that there were times when I needed to meet my word goal. And so my characters went to church and they listened to a sermon because my word count for that day had not gone into the novel. So I just put the sermon in. I did go back and put the words back in later so that it would count towards my total. But I do a lot of problem solving and reflecting through journaling. And I have stacks of journals that hopefully someone will get rid of, because that's where my heart is and stuff that, you know, like my kids don't need to know.
That's the question.
Sure. Does writing energize you? Do you ever feel it's a spiritual experience?
Yes, I mean, yes. Like Ken said, you know, when you get inspiration, you have to stop what you're doing immediately and write. And so I've written poems and notes and all sorts of things on napkins and paper placemats at like the, you know, fast food places where my kids were playing in the fun house thing or whatever, you know, writing poetry thing while they're playing around. And a lot of times I feel like if I step out of the way, then God can step in. And writing is not one of the spiritual gifts listed in Romans or 1 Corinthians. But there's a verse in Matthew, and John the Baptist is talking about, he must increase, I must decrease. And that's how I feel when if Sam Evans steps out of the way, then God can do what he wants to do.
And you, does writing energize you? Do you feel it's a spiritual experience?
Very much so. Almost all of my poetry and my reflections are a spiritual feeling and a spiritual expression. I hope that happens anyway. And it has always been that way. I was just thinking about my first writing experience where I really found out I could write, because I wasn't a very good student in school. And I never thought I'd be a writer, be writing. But anyway, I was an art teacher, sort of in that period. But the first time I got a letter or a paperback from an English professor at college that said, wow, this was good. I just about fell off my chair because I thought, you know, it surprised me so. And that was many years ago. And a lot has happened since then. And this book is one of them.
John?
Does writing energize me? I wouldn't use the word energize. It often annoys me. But it's something that I feel compelled to do. So once it's done, it can be fulfilling. You guys may have heard those saying, I don't like writing, but I like having written. And that's pretty much how I feel. It's hard work. But I like having completed a writing job. And as far as the question is with a spiritual experience, and the short answer to that is yes. It's very mysterious. And it's something that I never really thought a lot about until recently. I just briefly want to mention a book that I recommend on this subject. This is by an author named Bonita Hampton Wright. I don't know if you are familiar with her. She's a novelist, but she also writes about writing and spiritual matters. Bonita Hampton Wright. This book is called The Soul Tells a Story. It's about the connection between spirituality and creativity. And it's just wonderful. It's a wonderful book. And when I first read it several years ago, I had mixed feelings about it. I found myself keep going back to it. And she says, this is a quote from her, I see little difference between writing and praying. You know, and when I first read that, I thought, I didn't know what to think, but it seems kind of to be true, but again, in a very mysterious sort of way. I'm still learning about it.
And do you feel writing is a way to bring your faith to life? And has there ever been any connection to CUMC that reflects in your experience?
I think, as I said earlier, yeah, it all kind of reflects that. And then certainly my connection to a Christ United Methodist Church in 50+ years we've been members here. In fact, this all began at a workshop that we went to years ago for the adult education group, when we went to a workshop on the Alpha program. In the Alpha program was an altar call. You all know what altar calls are. And I avoided most of them. And then one time I thought, well, I guess I'll go. And I said a whole other book to tell you about what happened after that. But that's when I began writing. That was in the year 2000. Writing it the way I have been. So yeah, very strong connection, right? And religion and God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit.
John, what about you?
I finished 3 novels now, and there is an element or an aspect of spirituality in all of them. The first 2 only a little, but it's there. The more recent one is expanded. I didn't set out to do that, but it kind of came out anyway. It is a way to bring, writing is a way to bring my faith to life. And you know, I found myself thinking that I'd like to write what she would call a religious novel, or that's front and center. That's pretty intimidating, but it's something that Catholics do a lot. It's more Catholic religious fiction and serious things. Seems like other phenomena. However, that's something that's been on my mind a lot. As far as here at CUMC, there have been experiences where that had been very meaningful to me, and that I would like to write more about.
Amanda?
I have no interest in writing religious fiction. I read like the Frank Peretti Angels Fighting Demons stuff when I was in high school, and I read the Christy Miller series of Pining After the One. And I prefer my fiction to be well-rounded. So Ms. Marvel, is a TV show on Disney Plus, where the main character is Muslim. And you learn about her faith and how it influences her life. But I wouldn't look at the show and say, this is a Muslim TV show. When you read The Seed Keeper's Daughters, or there are these little pieces where you see how her native experiences shape the way that she walks in the world. And that's what I try to put into my novels, that my characters have faith. And they often belong to a church, but it also isn't the focus of the book. It's part of who they are, so that people might have an experience of what it could be like for them. My first novel was about a young man who discovers that, well, he wants to rob a museum, but that's like, you know, the plot. But in it, he's discovering that he might be gay, and he's having to reconcile his sense of what a good Christian does with this identity of who he's discovering he is. So, so there's definite faith aspects to it, but I would never classify anything I write as Christian fiction.
My faith and writing are absolutely connected. I asked Jesus to be the Lord of my life when I was 8 years old. And I started writing poetry when I was 8 years old. And I called it all Jesus poetry, because no matter how I tried to start the poem, it all ended with some sort of spiritual bent or discovery at the end. So I felt like it was almost like I said earlier, like God was writing through me. It's kind of what it felt like. I have written blogs about experiences that have happened here at Christ. And one of them was my first Ash Wednesday after my husband died. My husband was a United Methodist pastor. And I remember the first time he was a pastor and he put ashes on my forehead, and the last time that he put ashes on my forehead. And then, so I definitely blogged about that first Ash Wednesday, remembering dust to dust. And that was a really powerful moment and spiritual experience. So in that devotional book I have at the back, there are stories about different adventures I've gone on, and connecting them to scripture. And 2 or 3 of them have to do with United Methodist camps. Star Lake was one of them for a long time. And so I wrote some things about that. And then there's another one about me almost drowning up at Lake Coronis Assembly Grounds. So the United Methodist Church is definitely intertwined in a lot of my writing.
And I would say that I wrote about that Ash Wednesday as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah, from an outsider's view, and my experience of Sam's reaction to the service. I'll tell you more about what I said Sunday, but not in front of some of our best friends here. Yeah, and
I'll start with you, Sam. So talk about publishing and your experiences with publishing. What was the process? Was it difficult?
I wrote to a lot of agents. I feel like I have to shop for agents, and I did not succeed that way. The way I succeeded in finding an editor and publisher was by going to a Christian Writers Conference, and at a lot of them they give you a 5 to 15 minute meet and greet with an editor or publisher or author, and you can choose a lot of like who you meet with, but you have to have your elevator pitch is what they call it, 30 seconds about yourself and your book, ready, set, go, and you meet this person. It's kind of like speed dating. So I went to one of these conferences, and I was sitting by a fire, actually, an indoor fireplace, and 2 different publishers sat down, old friends. I didn't know who they were, and they just started talking. And the 3 of us started talking, and they engaged me in conversation. And then this crazy photographer who was wearing shorts, even though there are 3 feet of snow, there's 3 feet of snow on the ground. He came over and he knew them, and they were all talking. We were all talking. The punchline is, so Scotty Domain leaned over and, because I said, you know, I think you're one of my one-on-ones tomorrow. And she leaned over and she put her hand on my knee and she said, oh, I hope I like your writing too. So I would say that putting myself in an opportunity to meet people, and then also my character is what helped me accomplish becoming finding a publisher. And so she did publish my Love Letters to Miscarriage Moms book, which was just published like a couple weeks ago. And then the crazy photographer guy ended up co-writing devotional with me. We each wrote 20 devotions on adventure, and he's, you know, swiftwater rescue instructor and certified rock climber, all sorts of things. So he's very professional, and my adventures are more like what not to do in the wilderness. So we balance each other out. But I met both my co-author and my co-author.
What about publishing and not publishing, or even never wanting to?
Yeah, so the thing that I think about publishing now would be some of the curriculum that I'm writing for children and youth, connecting gaming and pretty much being a nerd with faith and biblical literacy. So as I'm doing my lessons at the board game camp or at Club 6-7 or with youth group, thinking about how other people could take this and use it in their context. I don't think it would ever come out in a physical book, but I could see it being an online PDF that I might sell someday.
And how about your experience with your publishing?
I took the easy route, I guess. I paid for it. There are many places that will accept your, or they want to go through your book first and then they'll accept it. And they have certain ways of public, or certain ways for you to pay for having it published. And I chose that I submitted it to 4 different places, and all 4 of them choose that they would publish it. And I'm not sure if it was for the money or if it was a good book. Anyway, I chose Covenant Publishing, and I'm very happy with working with them. And they will not take any commission or any book writing, anything from the book until I get my money that I invested in it first. That all that. So that was one thing that I felt good about that.
Publishing, I think every writer wants to be published. You want to show people what you do. And it's a gratifying thing. So I've had short things published over the years. Some short stories, poetry, a lot of reviews, book and music reviews. But over the last 10 to 15 years, where I've been writing exclusively novels, like I said, I've finished 3. I just more or less finished the 3rd one. I haven't tried to market it yet, but the other 2, I spent a lot of time trying to get agents and publishers interested, and they are not published. So I've written 3, not of one of them has been published yet. I don't know what's going to happen with the new one, number 3, but we'll see. It's a very, very difficult process to try to interest a publisher or an agent. The traditional route is to contact a literary agent, get them on your side, and they will try to sell it to a publisher. Agents are just as picky as publishers. It's an extremely difficult process to get their attention. So my second novel in particular, I had high hopes for that. I contacted approximately 50 agents and publishers. None of them had a serious interest. So that gets pretty discouraging after a while. You learn things along the way about how to market them, how to get the interest of an agent or a publisher. You pick up information along the way. I think with my second novel, it's too long. I didn't have a sense of what's too short and what's too long in the novel. My first novel was 70,000 words. It's a little short. It didn't seem short to me, but that's considered a little short. The second novel was close to 100,000 words. It's about, what is that? It's close to 400 pages of manuscript, something like that. That was too long. I didn't realize. I didn't realize that publishers they're loath to touch something that long. So the sweet spot, it turns out, is about 80,000 words. If you're writing a novel. If you want to sell it to a traditional publisher or get help from an agent. So that's what I had in mind all the way through the writing of this third one. It's right at 80,000 words. So we'll see if that helps. I don't know if it will or not. But if any of you know a literary agent, please talk to me. I won't name. Thanks very much. So that's my thoughts on both.
All right, I want to make sure we have time at the end for questions as well as time to go up and speak with authors, and we have Sam who has a table with for books too after that. But I'll just go backwards. I'll start with you, John. What is there anything you'd like to share with anybody? Is there like one thing you'd like to tell someone who wants to be an author? Are there any classes coming up you'd like to talk about, or?
I've got something concrete right here. If any of you are interested in writing fiction, I've got a list of recommended books about fiction writing. And these are handouts for you to take one of these books that I found particularly helpful. It is, if you're, again, I'm talking strictly about fiction writing. If you're interested in that, if you've never taken a class in fiction writing or gone to a conference, I would recommend that. It's helpful. Benny and Hampton Wright's book is on this list, by the way. Fantastic writer. So feel free to come back for it too. Take a copy of my list, and I hope it will help somebody.
Thank you. And is there anything you'd like to share or make sure someone really knew about?
Well, I did want to share one thing. Is in the midst of all of this, putting all this stuff together, I started a children's book. I don't know why. I'm not sure where it came from, except the name Milo from my one son's dog drew me in, and I started writing a book about Milo, the suitcase dog. I haven't finished it and kind of put it aside while I was working on it. But maybe someday I'll get back to that.
In addition to National Novel Writing Month, which is in November, there's also a National Graphic Novel Writing Month. There is a Screenplay Month. There is a Poetry Month. And so for me, having something concrete with deadlines, and like with NaNoWriMo, you can even put your page count or your word count in every day, and it'll give you little badges and things like that as you make progress. That really helps. For me, it created some accountability, which is a good thing. My last novel, I went into National Novel Writing Month with no clear idea of what I wanted to do, and it was November 1st. So I said, okay, I'm gonna take a formula, like, you know, a Hallmark movie with a meet cute and a miscommunication and a good resolution. And I'm gonna write about an area I know, so it's set in the Driftless, like right here in Rochester. And that's the one that I'm kind of poking around editing and seeing if I want to do something with it. So they say there are folks who are planners for National Novel Writing Month who have like an outline and a list of their character development and things. I am a pantser. I fly by the seat of my pants.
That's my dad as well,
Mhm.
answer. I would say it's small steps that lead to more opportunities. Taking small opportunities in my case led to different and better opportunity, or not better, but more opportunity. So I started blogging, and Eric provided a picture for my blog, and then he read the blog, and then he invited me to write the devotional with him. So I was putting these blogs up that were adventure themed, and then I was invited to do some freelance writing, and because I had some of that adventure stuff up, from the freelance people could see, oh, like, she is legit, she's writing. And then the freelance thing, actually, it was like a writing boot camp, and I felt like a terrible writer by the time I was done. Like, I can't believe you hired me, because I had to write, it was 2,000 words, a short story from first person, and it came back all red. The track changes, the entire document was red. Oh my goodness. But I became a better writer because of that. And so everything led to something different.
I want to add too, that if you just want to write and have fun, there are whole communities online that write something called fan fiction, where you can take a book or a movie or a TV show and write your own little story within that world. There are a couple websites that you can put it onto, and people will definitely read it. They all have different boxes that you can tick as you're going to look to read things for what you want and what you don't want. But if you're like, I just would love to write something and have someone read it, fan fiction has a huge following.
Thank you, everybody. Are there any questions?
Just Amanda, I just wanted to share with you, a friend of mine would hold journal. And she told me years ago, the very first page, even on the cover, it said, something should happen to me, burn these, don't read them, burn them. So, I wanted to share that with you.
Thank you.
John, what are the topics of your two novels?
The first one, I'm originally from the South, originally from Memphis, grew up in Memphis, and the first one is set in Memphis in the 1970s. And it has kind of a theme of the transition away from the Vietnam years and 60s into something else. And it's set in the early 70s. It's called Young Man River, play on Old Man River. Because it's about young people. I think maybe the title was the best thing about the novel. So I learned a lot from that. The second novel, I put a lot of work into. It's about folk singers in Chicago in the early 1960s, and about the folk music scene and how that morphed into folk rock. I did a lot of research. That's the novel that turned out to be close to 100,000 words. I'm very proud of that novel, and I don't rule out self-publishing them eventually. The third one, the one that I've just almost finished, is called Spurwink Road. Does anybody know what a spurwink is? That's a word I ran up on in Maine. It's an old English word for seagull.
Oh.
And you will see place names up there with the word Spurwink. So Spurwink Road is about, again, a Memphian that keeps popping up, who marries, has a disastrous marriage to a real colorful character. They move out west. That falls apart. He's back home in Memphis. In the middle section of the novel, has to do a lot of therapy and other things to get over that experience, and then he moves to Maine. That's where the word Sterling pops up. That's the new one, and I haven't even started marketing it yet.
Any other questions?
Well, just, what, for anybody can answer, what comes first to your novel? Your report or whatever reply stimulated this. What comes first, the novel or the title?
I love the subject of titles.
The title
That
comes
interests me, and I often will have, I have this experience, but some people have to, where I have a title before I have a story.
Okay.
I just have a title for me. And I've done that a lot of stories.
Both ways for me. I'll come up with a phrase and be like, oh my gosh, that's the title. And I need to write it down on a napkin before I forget it.
Book first for me. I think some of mine don't even have titles.
This kind of came as a package, and the title actually came from a poem in the book. It's called Drowning in God's Love. And that's where the title came from, and I didn't know what I was going to title it. That seemed like it fit in and kind of explained the whole book.
When you get to the, like, publishing, editing. Your heart's on a platter, because it's your words, your heart, your writing, and then the words get diced, the title gets changed, the cover you had in your mind just goes. So publishers also have a lot to say about the marketing side of it and what's gonna sell and what's not.
With the body, did that happen?
At first, and then you just get used to, okay, that's the way it is.
You keep it up and go with it.
Yes, I mean, many versions. Because by the end, you're saying this stupid book and editing the edited version. So. It's definitely humbling. Like to be rejected by agents and to have editors pick apart your words and say, "Oh, this could be better." Like I hand something in that I think is phenomenal and get it back, and my editor disagrees. So. Yeah, good.
And Ken, you're also an artist that you can, I'd like to talk just a little bit about your feelings and your thoughts that you put down in words, but also feelings and thoughts that you might paint on a canvas.
They're very similar, I think, when you're painting something. The creativity part of it, creating something, I think is very similar. Excuse me, similar to writing. In writing, it's almost the same thing. It's interesting when you're doing artwork or writing or whatever. At least for me, there is a point, particularly in artwork, when I'm doing something in art, and there's sort of a switch. It's hard to explain, but it's you're thinking about things in a different way. It struck my students when you get to the end and you think I don't have any more ideas. Just try a little bit harder and you'll make that over you'll switch into a different. Anyway, I don't know how to explain that exactly. I think there's a great similarity between the two.
I was recently reading someone who was talking about short stories, and actually I think that they were in sermons, but the thing they were talking about was the point of the story, and I think that's kind of what Ken was getting at, that sometimes that all of this gets laid out to a point. And I was thinking of a college professor that was kind of joking around with the class before it started, and everybody was saying, paying attention. And, you know, this is back and forth, and all of a sudden, the professor made this point, he felt a pin drop in the room. And anyway, the thought was thinking about it in terms of the parables. But he said there's so many different points that a person may have in the story. And sometimes it's just the story somebody tells to get the attention to go on. I'm wondering if you have more comments, so, you know, I appreciate what Ken was saying about the point. But I'd like to hear some, you know, more comments on that.
The point of the story or the point of writing?
Actually, I think it can be both of them, but I hope it continue the story that you're telling and why it's important to tell.
Well, as far as the nonfiction stuff, from the miscarriage perspective, I wrote in the moment because I really wanted women to know that they weren't alone in what they were thinking and feeling and experiencing. So I think nonfiction is a little bit easier to the point that is, because I set out to write a book about miscarriage. Fiction, there are, I don't know if you've experienced this when you write, but there are sub-themes that kind of come in, and sometimes the characters reveal those subplots themselves without permission from me, actually. And they just kind of show me what the story is about. So one of the stories that I've written ended up being a little bit about child trafficking. And I didn't realize it was going that direction. And it's written for kids, so it's very like zoomed out on how bad that could be in real life. But it kind of deals with that topic. Yeah.
I would say the one of my books that I went into thinking I want to tell this story was about human trafficking in Duluth. So, yeah, the point of that one was to raise awareness of human trafficking. I think maybe the UMW was doing stuff at that time with that particular topic.
Because of the Super Bowl or the, I don't know, no, never mind.
I have to go to work.
Just one last thing, like, all of you have put yourself in the writing, it's very personal, I think. Whether you're creating or a poem or something that you put yourself into it. And with anything else, whether it's painting or any of the arts, it's reviewed or it's critiqued. And how do you keep going? How do you keep from getting discouraged?
The first time I wrote for the freelance boot camp and my paper came back to me and I was practically in tears because I thought I was an amazing writer until I got my story back. The editor talked to me and she said, no, it's because you're such a good writer that I'm investing this time in you. If you're a good writer, let's make you an even better one. And so since then, I've learned that the critiques I'm receiving from people who are more experienced than me are making me better. It's a learning process. It's all, so if I take it from that perspective, this person believes in me enough to tell me how to fix it and make it better. It makes me feel a lot better. So they believe in the message, they believe in my words, they're helping me refine it.
And or John, did you have any experience with that?
Well, writing these novels, particularly my second novel, getting a lot of dissensions and rejection. That was difficult. But you know, if you put a lot of time as a writer, that's what you do, and you're compelled to go back to it. So my writing doesn't depend on beginning to understand it now. My writing doesn't depend on me getting everything published. I'm going to want to do it anyway. So I'm not doing it for the money or anything like that. It's just, that's who I am and that's what I do. So I'll continue to write. And you want to be published, but if you get criticism, you get rejection, you just, if you're serious about writing, you just keep doing it.
I stopped writing poetry several years ago, and all of a sudden it's back again. In the morning, I was doing my devotion, the poem poured out until it kind of off again, on again. Experience. I was going to read you a short one I have in here, but so, but it is, as Fran was saying, you're kind of opening yourself up. This is the thing with art, doing artwork too, and particularly in elementary school that is teaching. About fourth grade, kids kind of get, I don't want to know, I'm not sure I want to show what I have, or, I'll probably make a mistake or something wrong. So it's bridging that situation.
So thank you again, everybody, for meeting today. This is going to be a little bit, people have any questions and visit and we go back there. Well,
I have handouts. I will see.
I knew that,
Yeah.
for me.
Are you still working with spiritual direction?
Yeah.
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 Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.